All right, welcome to the Breadcrumbs Project. Getting everything going over here on our side. Hope everything is going good on your side. All right, so we are live and recording and um, really going through the process of uh, understanding where this name came from, Latin America. It is under scrutiny such a dead giveaway. As a Spanish speaker since birth, I've been bilingual all my life, Spanish and English, and I can tell you, after studying Latin for the last many years, um, no, it has nothing to do with Spanish. There are some words here and there, but in English, there are some Latin words as well. But by the whole, Spanish, Castilian Spanish, has zippo nada to do with Latin. And that was on purpose, okay? That was on purpose. So Latin was a control language of the elites, of the citizens of Rome. It is a language that was not meant to be understood by the other nations. So I can pretty much assume that the Latins were also bilingual, if not trilingual, but they had a language all unto themselves. Not everybody spoke Latin, so so that's why I say it's a control language. There, there is um, an event that happened in 1492, and I can tell you that it's not our modern 1492 of the Gregorian calendar. This is the Latin Roman date of 1492, which is roughly 2776 right now. We're in 2776 right now, and or 2778 in the Roman calendar. So for us, 1492 really was not that long ago, roughly 500 years ago. We sure did advance really quickly in 500 years. Okay. 1776 was when the revolution happened. So that's, 300 years that the Americas had to be pretty well established just after the discovery, okay, the detection, as this map says right here in 1492 in the upper right hand corner. Okay, 1492 just detected. And you're telling me that 300 years we're going to have 13 colonies ready to separate from the king. And I'm going to tell you that is logistically impossible. And that's really where a lot of history breaks down, is in the logistics. And engineers and IT types and men that like to do. I'm going to sneeze, so I'm going to go on mute in a second. It's kind of chilly here in Spain right now, so hang on. Woo! All right. Thank goodness for a mute button, guys. That was loud. So, um, yeah, the logistics just don't work out. It's not there. It's just not there. You can't have fully developed colonies, wood cut and colonies made in 300 years of just detection of the Antilles. So we have to have Columbus and the Spaniards going up and crawling up through Santo Domingo, through Cuba, and then finally, at some point, hitting the mainland, which they say is the 1500s. All right, so you're hitting the mainland of Mexico in the 1500s. Where do all of these English people come from when we know that to the Spanish, the Americas were a great secret, were a national secret, and silver was pouring in, and nobody knew where and how the Spanish got so rich until the detection of the high seas and the Great Wars from Great Britain. So we don't have that founding properly. Doesn't make sense. And then you get to studying these maps, and it just doesn't make sense at all. This makes sense to me as far as how the Americas were created by the escaping Latins, by the Gaelic Empire. This makes perfect sense to me. The logistics of what they teach us in class, in school, doesn't work at all, not even close. So um, there had to be a control mechanism. The Latins had to know that sooner or later the European Latins or the Europeans, whatever was left of the Europeans, would eventually be able to rebuild ships. And that's another thing, by the way. That is another huge thing that happened whenever the Gaelic Empire decided to leave Europe and sailed over. I would say most sailed over, but I think there was other means of transportation in that time that are not documented in these books. That's for the future. If we can find uh, some nice documentation, but that's what I can deliver here as an unlicensed, thankfully, an undocumented archaeologist. So, as an unlicensed and undocumented archaeologist, I can make all the assumptions I want to, publish them, and let the world decide these theories and not get shot down by academia and inside the tent, and then the whole process of peer review, which is so high school. Am I good enough? Tell me I'm good enough. Science doesn't work like that. Science says, look, here is my theory. Here's the research I've done on my theory. And here is my presentation. And here it is. So I think when the Latins withdrew, they kept purebloods, and those are the royalty. And as in the case that I made yesterday, that I had an aha moment over the weekend and did some research, and sure enough, Constantine went with all the wealth in the world and conquered the Roman Empire, thereby making it one empire in the east. And Constantine came from the Gallic Empire, did not resettle in Rome, but created a new place in Constantinople and created a whole new religion that the Roman Empire had to adopt, that was centralized first in Constantinople, then back in Rome. And that is how the empire went through controlling through force and sword and spear, through just indoctrination. And so it came to the common folks, the peons, uh, the 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 humble farmers, the you know everybody else had to become devout, humble Catholics in Europe. And believe me, I was here during the 1960s and 70s, and I have more memory from the 70s because I was a little bit older. I was 8, 7, 10 years old around there, and I remember that the Catholic Church back then was tough and feared, if not respected, throughout Spain, especially northern Spain, where in the Basque country, where I was familiar with. Like, man, oh, you didn't go against the church, man. The church said it. There it is. It's done. Everything else you can do, but don't be a heretic. And so that's the type of control that the Roman Catholic Church had. And remember, everybody doesn't even think about the word Catholic, what it means. Yeah, I know what it means. It means, Mass and Pope and all of that. No, 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 no. Catholic means universal in Greek and also in Latin. So it's the Holy Roman Universal Church. So they have Europe and Asia, what's available by the church, and then they have Latin America where they're having a great time. They're having a great time over here. Um, you see some mooring ships on the screen here, but really, 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 that is fending off the Europeans, the pirates of the time, and just keeping control of the Europeans coming over here, and then just slowly releasing America and the Americas to the Europeans. But history that's written says that they came over here. No, no, no. There was detection, but there was always Latin America sending gold, money, and communication to the royalty. I would suspect bringing them over here for education and then resending them over there for to be to be the rulers. That is very much my strong guess until the common folk, the middle class, the merchant marines, the trading people, finally. Oh, and the point I was trying to get to was when the Gaelic Empire, when Latin America came over here and the Roman Catholic Church was in place, they burned the fleets and they took all the shipbuilders with them. So whatever remained of shipping in Europe was basically merchant shipping. There were no grand fleets from the countries. There was no grand Roman fleet anymore. And you have to put in your head that in the Mediterranean, which includes Egypt and Greece and Phoenicia, where Palestine is, these were great sailing merchant communities and countries with fleets. The Romans could build a fleet overnight and did so often. But when the collapse came, they burned all the ships that they could in um, in Europe and Great Britain, and then took the entire modern fleet that they had over here to Latin America. And if you see these ships depicted here, they're breathtaking and amazing. All right, and it's these ships right here. Zoom in on those bad boys. All right, and these guys are nothing like the ships that the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria, the three brigantines, I believe they're called, that discovered way over here the Antilles, where it says Cristofel, underlined. So whoever had this owned this map before it was resold to the public, had the same exact theory I did and kept his mouth shut. All right. So this is where it's documented. The Antilles was detected per Christopher Columbus in the year 1492. Now, I am going to say this is 1492, and all the años that I'm studying on all these maps is going to be Roman years. And I think the change came, and it was in the 1700s that the Gregorian map was established. I mean, the Gregorian calendar was established. Everybody thinks the Gregorian calendar was established at year zero. No, no, no. It was established in the 1700s, and we don't know how many times it was established and reestablished throughout time because history was very brutally rewritten. So by the Roman calendar that we're going off here, we're at year 2770 something, 76 or 78. All right. So, and this is the depiction of the people here. Remember the Patagonian giants. They look like this and they dress like this. They didn't look like that and dress like that because they're idiots and backwards. No, they were very comfortable. They were very healthy in comparison to the Europeans. All right. They were mining silver and gold and buying the silence of the Europeans through the royalty and those that are shipping until the shipping became too much. There was curiosity, and this is where the detection happened. And then they had to sail all the way back to Europe, and Europe had to sail all the way back over here. And you can't sail 24 hours a day. There's a certain time of the year that you're able to sail to the Americas. The Atlantic Ocean's rough. The Pacific Ocean is the Pacific Ocean, but it gets rough too. So they had to bunny hop all of this. All right. And I'm sure they were kept from coming inside of here. Oh, no. They did come inside of here because this says that merchant ships were detected because they had massive anchors and that the royalty, the regnas, okay, the royal the royal greeters had to come forth, and we had to deal with the ship that has now made contact in Panama. And so, um, yes, so the Europeans had amassed enough, rebuilt enough shipping, enough merchant shipping to take the chance to come over and started coming over more and more and more. And then all of these guys, all of these Latins that were here, they had to take control of how Europe was going to make contact and grow within the Americas. And that's where the Freemasons came in. Before we go away from this, and we're in this area, all right, this is the original Panama Canal. It was huge, and through modern satellite photography, we're able to see the silted up remains of this Panama Canal. And now it's a tiny little river that goes into a big lake that is controlled by locks. But if you dug up the ancient Panama Canal that this one came from, which again lends so much credence to this map being well over 1,000 years old to 1,300 years old. We have to understand that these maps were done in vellum, that they come from brass plates as well. So this map could either be coming from an ancient uh, um, atlas that was in a Roman library, which there are so many of, and other libraries throughout the Mediterranean. And vellum, if you keep it compressed and out of sunlight, it'll last thousands of years. But so will copper plates. So this is definitely either vellum, which I see vellum here, or it's a copper plate that has just been reproduced. And so this is the Panama Canal that the original colonizers of Latin America came to. It's this map that we've been studying. The question was, how did the Latins land here and were able to populate things? And here's the ships that they were using, which are far more modern than the Spaniards that found the ships in 1492 by far. And yes, we can definitely tell this is a Latin style ship because it has um, the boarding ladder to board other ships, but also to make landfall and to be able to offload from the ship and unload from the ship. So that is a very Roman feature. That is a very Latin feature. The ladder, the boarding ladder. And here's their style. So yes, a very advanced ship. And look at the sails at how they bow out. Okay, that is not a square mast rig. A square mast rig does not let their canvas go out like that at all. So these ships had many of the advancements that the Latins had, that the Greeks had lent to shipping, and that the Phoenicians had lent to shipping. They had made it through a Panama Canal that had already been dug, obviously, and were able to settle on the west side of Mexico away from the Roman Empire, the Eastern Latin Empire. And so and they had to know that detection was coming. And once detection happened, that's where the Freemasons came in. Because we know George Washington and all of his peeps were Freemasons, all the founding fathers. And everybody involved in in royalty are involved with one occult organization, if not all of them, if not many, okay? So the Freemasons were the organization that would give free housing to the wealthy and the elite when they first come over from Europe, establish whatever they need to establish to bring over more Europeans, as they did when they were coming to Staten Island. And we were adopting these people and bringing them in and re-educating them and then sending them throughout the country to these magnificent cities that had these magnificent, incredible, indescribable buildings and just letting them settle. And they resettled and farming, and so this was already settled land. but they had to somehow mesh society with Europe again, mesh the Americas with Europe because contact had been made, and so a whole re-education process went through the Roman Catholic Church. So all the universities are based on the Jesuits, Loyola, um, Harvard, all of the universities, all the old universities are based on the Roman Catholics. Even when Henry VIII dissolved the Roman Catholics in Great Britain, I mean they were still there. The Jesuits all were just part of the system. There was a blink, and then everything reset. But all of the universities in Europe were set up by the Jesuits, and they re-educated Europe on a brand new history after the Dark Ages and in the medieval times that were just harsh on European society. And then came the Renaissance, and that's the re education and the enlightenment of Europe, of the already enlightened and established Americas. Yeah, yeah, it's an amazing thing. And that's why they had the Rockefellers, and that's why you had all these great families. And then you brought in the potato farmers, the uneducated from Europe, and re-educated them on America. And I'm the product of that. My grandfather was raised in the north of Spain. All of his education was done through uh, the Roman Catholic Church, monasteries, and then uh, the universities were set up by the Jesuits, Loyola universities, what have you, and then um, your education was documented and certified by these guys, and you had the new history of the New World and of Europe. And my great grandfather came off the boat from Ireland. My dad was red haired, freckly skin, and big, big old boy. And when he was in the sun, he got red. And then when he got out of the sun, if he didn't have a sunburn, he went back to white. But he had red and white. There was no tan. My mom, thankfully, has that olive skin from the Basque region, blue eyes. They both had blue eyes, and they were re-educated, completely re-educated. And so Freemasonry was part of the educational system, part of the police system, part of every system. So they were the guys that basically re-educated everybody and rewrote the story of the Americas. But the term Latin America stayed in. And all the elites back then spoke Latin. All the royals spoke and read Latin, communicated and stayed in touch through Latin, a language which the common folk did not understand. Your pithy farmer did not understand Latin. And so the party was over, you know, and they compress so much history. It's like the 1800s, 1900s, the Roaring 20s, 1920s. That was just a decade. And you look at the architecture from the 19 from the 1920s, from the Roaring Twenties. The the golly, I always miss these terms when I really need them. Um, but that architecture, uh, that neo rich. Um, there's and it's gonna hit me, after I turn off record. But you guys know what I'm talking about. All that Roaring Twenties, you had to have an um, the buildings that reflect uh, that style. Man, it had to take decades to build them. You had to have artisans. The Chrysler Building, by God, the Chrysler Building's amazing. We don't have any photographs, no documentation, no building records of the Chrysler Building, and it's magnificent. It is magnificent. So, the trains, the Zeppelins, there was just a whole society that was set up that had to be reset with World War One and then World War Two. Yep. There's been history rewrite after history rewrite. So over the 30-minute marker, but yes, the Freemasons existed throughout the Americas, throughout Latin America, and they were the ones that welcomed the Europeans in and then funneled them through the system and got them re-educated, children, and all that stuff. So, um, yeah, the Americas were well populated by the time the Europeans got here, and um, and they were ready. They were absolutely ready. They had a secret society set up throughout the Americas, ready to indoctrinate the newcomers. And that's the power of George Washington being a Freemason and all the founding fathers being Freemasons. Freemason is franc maçon in French, and franc maçon basically is free house. And that was a way, by the way, of testing for Freemasons back in the day, I would suspect. Are you Frank Mason? Oh, no, no, no. And or the response, I would guess, this is just a wild guess, would be, oh, many people confuse me for Frank Mason. You're not the first. And they'd probably have the secret handshake that they would give, and they know that they were Masons. But yeah, I've got to guess that everybody throughout Latin America was a Freemason. We have throughout Latin America, there's Freemasonicism, and then throughout Europe, especially Great Britain and the flow of money. So you have the city of London, and that was a Roman city established 64 A.D., 64 C, wherever you want to say, in an unbroken chain until today, 2025 or 2770 something, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It's fascinating. And this isn't just one copy of the map. There are many copies of this map in well-established collections and in Congress, in the Library of Congress. So, um, yeah, it is fascinating stuff. All right, thank you all for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. Um, yeah, the disclosure is a big thing happening in this time of the world. So that is a big part of what the Q movement and a lot of people in the Trump administration are all about is disclosure. I don't have much to do with any of those folks, but I'm coming with a hidden history and some disclosure. All right, thanks for joining us, and I hope you get a lot out of it. and help spread the word. There's a whole history that we need to learn about. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you tomorrow, 5